Avengers energy drink.
What'd you get that?
I think it's like a job lot, man. It's like a caffeine-free energy drink because I'm trying to like my caffeine tolerance is so freaking high because I drink so much coffee that I'm trying to back off a little bit just so that like my tolerance doesn't get so high to that like to the point where I need to have like a heart murmur to feel awake.
Yeah, dude. I feel you right there. Like I drink my coffee in the morning and stuff, and then what was it? Got kind of addicted to pre-workout for a while.
Mm,
So very, very high tolerance. I need something a little more natural sometimes.
yeah, I hear that.
See
Cheers
if
to
I
that.
can. All right. Well, we are live, my friend. And hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to Joe's Geek Show, the video series where we talk comics. And joining me today, we have my good friend, DarkKnightNation. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me on. I'm glad we get to sit down and chat some comics while everybody's home, and I hope everybody's doing well with all this craziness.
Hey, absolutely, absolutely. So today we are actually going to be talking about Robin, the 80th anniversary. And this is the cover that I selected, that nice Jim Lee cover. And yeah, there you go. Dark Knight's got it too, looking good. You also got, what other covers? What's that other cover you got still?
It's Yasmin Putri. It's the 2010 cover.
Yeah.
All of the Robins.
Digging it. So we're kind of just going to, go over the book briefly. We're going to talk about, some of the stories that are in it. If we can get to them all, that'd be pretty dope. So I figure we'll start off, this whole thing. So it's been 80 years since the introduction of the character Robin, starting all the way back, with Dick Grayson. So Dark Knight, I'm going to toss the reins to you first. Like, what do you think about the overall idea of Robin?
I mean, Robin's great. The idea of Robin, I don't know if it would have slid as well if he wasn't created in the time that he was. Obviously nowadays there are a lot of social critiques as to why Robin is an inappropriate figure in comics, but I think just by virtue of the fact that we've had Robin and we've had several different, characters in the role of Robin, it's cemented itself as one of the most important legacies in comics. He's only a year younger than Batman in terms of publication history. He appeared in Detective Comics number 38. And, I think Robin is one of the most underappreciated mantles in comics. I think that especially in a post like Grant Morrison Batman landscape, I feel like we should always have a Batman and Robin or a Robin book. Just because I think again, it's an important legacy. B, it usually sells at least moderately well. And C, I think there's so much story to mine out of these individual characters, but also getting to explore them in context with each other because they all have very, very different relationships with one another just based on their overall context in the Bat family, their context in the DC universe, so on and so forth. So, yeah, I think Robin is a super important legacy, is a super important character to keep around in comics, and I'm hoping that the sales for this book are tremendously high, and that might inspire a little bit more Robin in DC Comics.
Hey, very well said, very well said. And actually, you are the one that inspired me to go ahead and pick up a copy of Robin for myself because that I initially was not planning on it because, like, my whole thing is when it comes to Robin, I understand the importance of the character. I know, it's a very rich history just with the character and how many, people have held that mantle like over the years and stuff like that. And I'll admit it's like you said that Robin is a little underappreciated. And I actually am one of the ones that, tend to take that route of not looking at Robin a little bit more, a little bit more often and a little bit more than I should. Because, especially when you're a kid, I mean, obviously it's all about Batman and stuff like that. When I was a kid playing superheroes with my friends, it was all who wanted to be Batman. Robin was always the butt of the joke, a lot of times, and even like the Super Friends TV series, oftentimes just wasn't really ever taken seriously in the in the eyes of in the eyes of a lot of people, especially kids and stuff like that. Yeah, Batman is the one. So when I started getting into comics, like seriously getting into comics, and really came across the Robin, the standalone Robin titles, I was immediately impressed just how well that character can stand on his own. Whether it's the Dick Grayson character or the Jason Todd or Tim Drake and stuff like that. Each of these characters that have held the Robin title, have cemented themselves in that position. And I can, as I get into it, can understand why Robin is very important to the role of Batman, because Robin is a lot of times, Batman's like tether, to almost to humanity in general, because he's not just trying to raise the next generation of crime fighters. It's like it's almost like he's trying to, keep himself human in that regard by, taking on a father-like role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
and the thing is that to the same degree, a lot of the kids that he's taking on mirror him in so many different ways. And it's a chance for him to kind of heal himself in a way by healing these young kids who, are experiencing great trauma and allowing them to grow from it.
yep.
And there are a lot of like rational ways that somebody could psychoanalyze that and see how wrong it is that, kids are fighting crime. But in the context of this universe and in the context of these kids' agencies, and those agencies mature as they get older. I mean, I think, at least in the realm of superhero comics, in DC Comics in particular, yeah, I mean, I truly do think that is one of the most valuable aspects is, in trying to help these kids, it allows Bruce a sense of self-recovery because he's able to watch these kids grow and heal from, their pasts.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, which is going to take us into some of the stories now here in Robin. So, I figure, yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at the first story, which is a Dick Grayson Robin story in A Little Nudge. This one's written by Marv Wolfman, with pencils by Tom Grummett, inks Scott Hanna, Adriana Lucas on colors, and Tom Napolitano on letters. So, since you're the guest, I'm going to go ahead and ask you what, kind of have you walk us through a little synopsis and then kind of what you thought of the book.
Sure. Yeah. So it's basically a rehash of the inciting incident that caused Robin to leave Batman and go off to, join the Titans full time and eventually become Nightwing and to put down the mantle of Robin, becoming his own man. The art's great. Todd Grummett's art style is really evocative of like old Jim Aparo artwork. It looks really, really great. And Tom Grummett is a character that, is an artist who has a famed history on Robin. So it's great to see him on it. Marv Wolfman, I mean, he's like the grandpa of comics, so I'm all for it. He's like that sweet old grandpa. So basically, it starts off with Robin disobeying Batman in a hostage situation where Victor Zsasz has, a priest pretty much held up at knife point. They have an argument into the cave. It fast forwards into another situation with a couple of armed thieves. They end up misfiring and shooting a kid in the shoulder, which is like surprisingly dark for Wolfman. And Batman tells Robin uncharacteristically, if I might say, that he needs to go chase after the men and leave this poor fucking kid. Excuse my language. And then, they have a debate about it in the cave. Afterwards, Robin's like, it's basically a less aggressive final interaction of Batman, of Dick Grayson as Robin and with Bruce Wayne, Batman. And he's like, I love you, but like, I got to go off and be my own man. And then he leaves, and then Batman, his internal monologue reflects on it. He's like, oh, well, I know you wouldn't have gone if I didn't give you that little push. And story ends. Which like in like the concept I really, really liked. And the one thing that really kills this story for me the most is the complete mischaracterization of Batman. I mean, for Batman life, is the sanctity of his mission. He would not,
Mhm.
especially to go after a couple of half-bit crooks, he would not leave an injured child who has just been shot. Even if that were like the main point of trying to drive Dick Grayson away, and even
Mhm.
if he wanted to bank on Dick Grayson making the right, I don't think Batman would play with a life in order to teach Dick Grayson a lesson, especially not a child's life. So that's what really set this story back for me. Aside from the fact that like Marv Wolfman has a really difficult time writing like contemporary dialogue, which is a thing I
Mhm.
we talk about a lot in comics. Like the central idea is great because it makes Dick Grayson his maturing out of the role of Robin, less aggressive, a little bit more of a grounded choice, for him to make for himself. And I like that idea. But for me, again, really like this is a fundamental misunderstanding of
Mhm.
Batman. Like, and I know I shouldn't necessarily be focusing on that in a Robin book, but he chose to include it. He chose to make this a central part of his story that Batman is going to play with the life of a child on the wager that Dick Grayson is going to make, this right personal choice. It's just it doesn't feel
It didn't sit right with you, kind of.
yeah, I don't know. How are you feeling about it?
Yeah, I mean, when I read it, like at first, I was really confused by it at first, like because, like you said, Batman, little uncharacteristic. Like he was kind of, I thought Batman was kind of being
A
bit of
douche?
a dick.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a bit. I was starting to get some All Star Batman flashbacks. Like, do what I say because I'm the goddamn Batman. Know your role.
Yeah, he pegs a rat at him. He's like, eat it.
Exactly. And then then the book just kind of throws it where, Dick Grayson's like, that was the turning point where he's like, okay, hey, kind of like, out kind of outgrown this role a little bit. I'm gonna go do my own thing. And then, Batman's all like, yeah. Deep down I knew the truth and I was just trying to give you that little nudge so you could go be your own man. And I thought that part was kind of nice. It was just the fact, it was just all the factors leading up to that moment. I just had so many questions where I was just like, isn't there a different approach that you could have taken with
Oh, man.
Batman? That would have seemed like a little less douchey.
It's not even like douchey for me because I think Batman would definitely do something that is
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
offensive, but
But it
it's
was
like,
like you were saying with like some of his decisions of,
oh yeah, Batman wouldn't compromise the mission to teach Dick
mm-mm.
Grayson the mission to teach him a lesson, especially one not this like urgent, you know.
Yeah.
And again, like the life of a child, I thought that it was a grave mischaracterization of Batman. And I think that Wolfman really sacrificed character to get where he wanted to get,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is a little bit disappointing because, in premise, I really do like the idea of the story, just not so much the overall execution. But like, no harm, no foul. I love, like I said, I love Marv Wolfman. He's like the sweet, adorable grandfather of current comics. So like, more.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, but I will say though, there are some things about this particular story though, that I did like the explanation of, when Robin was telling Batman here that, when you found me, I was just a kid. And unlike you, I didn't fester in the hate and torment of wanting to catch my parents' killer. We did it, basically that same night and stuff like that. And, it's little things like that when we were talking about earlier and how Batman, really, when he's taking these in these Robins, he's really focusing about how can I make me but better. You know what I mean? And it's little stuff like that I really did like about the story. But yeah, I mean, like you said, as far as the overall package goes, it did fall just a little short.
Yeah, it's definitely like because of that, it's towards the bottom for me
Mm-hmm.
in terms of these stories. And you're right, that moment is really great. And I think that's also what made it a little bit more jarring because there was a part of Wolfman that really exhibited a thorough understanding of their relationship, and then
Mm-hmm.
he just like completely mischaracterized Batman. You know what I mean? It's like I'm not gonna have like a cake and then eat some ground beef immediately after. Like it doesn't work.
Yeah, I feel you there. I feel you there. Well, I mean, I guess the upside though is at least Frank Miller didn't write that one.
I mean I was kind of surprised we didn't get a Carrie Kelly story.
I know. I was kind of surprised too when I was looking
Spoilers
over it,
for
especially
anybody that
especially with writing two of the biggest Batman books like that's still talked about today. But
yeah, well,
still.
I mean, on top of the fact that Carrie Kelly is super iconic, we got a Stephanie Brown story, but we didn't get Carrie Kelly. I was like, geez, man. I was like, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, very true, very true. Okay, so do you want to go down to the next one, or do you want to kind of hop around a little bit?
It doesn't matter. I mean, we can go through it just because I think that the majority of these stories are going to be really quick to get through. Uh,
Yeah, absolutely.
this next one, I mean, really, I don't think there's much to say about like the plot aside from the fact that it's during Cataclysm when Gotham City fell victim to like a 9.2 earthquake and it like completely.
Oh, No Man's Land,
Yeah. Well, I mean, Cataclysm like came before No Man's Land, so this is like right.
Cataclysm. I
Yeah,
don't think I remember that one.
Cataclysm was like the event that set up No Man's Land. So No
Yeah,
Man's
okay,
was like
yeah,
Gotham, like I don't remember how much time after the earthquake.
yeah. After the
Cataclysm was
earthquake, right,
the
right.
actual earthquake. So this is like fresh. So and this is part of a series called Aftershocks, which was like it was part of the Cataclysm event, really. Like it's like what happened immediately after the earthquake. Like what is like it's all the urgent care that's going down.
Yeah, I don't know. In my mind, I for some reason run everything together every time.
No, it's okay. I mean, people just kind of lump that entire thing in as No Man's Land. It's like the same way that people lump Knight's End and the first arc and Nightfall all together under Nightfall. It just happens.
Yeah.
But really, this story is like almost immediately post earthquake.
Mhm.
Dick Grayson saves an EMT, and the EMT points out a vehicle that is trapped. I don't know. The art is kind of unclear as to like the mapping, like the physical mapping of the location and the layout. Like it's on a bridge, but the car that he's trying to save is I don't. I mean, I don't know exactly where the car is.
I mean, it kind of looks like. I mean, to me, it looks like maybe it was just the. Yeah, it's really hard to tell. Almost like it would be under the bridge.
Yeah,
But
it's
it looks like it's a collapsed road that leads to that area.
yeah, it's like a single speck of the bridge that's still standing. He saves the car after it's about to fall off because it's
Mhm.
totally non-original. And he uses this kind of crane hook to save the car. Woman's inside. The EMT that he saved prior helped her deliver a baby, and when he looks, it's the baby. She's like, I think. She was like, she wants to name after you, and he says, well, Robin works, right?
It's a
And
nice sentiment.
the sentiment's cool, but literally nothing happened. Like I feel like this story was so unimportant, and it was just like nothing happened. Which is kind of disappointing because I'm a big fan of Chuck Dixon's Nightwing. I'm a big fan of Chuck Dixon's Robin run.
Hmm.
He's put an indelible mark on that mantle of Robin and even Nightwing. And I was just like, man, literally nothing happened. Like the thing about these anthology stories are that the good ones are so thoroughly about character, and they say something about the character at their core or what they mean to the universe that they live in. And this just felt so routine Like, if the best thing in your issue was that somebody, like, wants to name a child after you because you saved them, it's like, well, Nightwing saves people on a daily basis. So why wouldn't they all want to save their children from them? You know what I mean? Or name their children after him. I don't know. It's like, it was so dry.
Yeah, I kind of had a similar feeling, like, and I noticed that when it comes to a lot of these prestige format anniversary editions, a lot of the times it's like you can tell they want to reach a certain page count, and at some point you got to kind of read a story and almost ask yourself, was that a last minute addition? Just to kind of beef it up a little bit, or I mean, it's definitely filler for sure.
I mean, that's the thing, is that like these anthology stories are like, to me, and it's because like we've been fortunate enough to see some really, really great anthology stories in some of these like anniversaries or like big spectacular issues. And like I was saying, to me, they should be something that's really indicative of the character, something that really represents them, shows who they are, shows what their impact is to the world around them. And this was nothing. I don't think this was a last minute fill-in. I mean, I don't think Chuck Dixon has written like a single good book in years. Like, I went to right before this book came out, I like went to his website to see like what he was up to. And he was like, his novel, he's like writing a novel, and it's so out, like, and it's not even out there in a like, oh my god, this is so like smart and interesting, and I would never think to weave these things together. I'm like, oh my god, this doesn't even work like from the summary.
Oh, sort of like a why would you put these things together kind of deal?
It's like, this is a mess. It's not even like questioning wild. I'm just like, structurally, like tonally, like it just seems like you don't know how to write. And also, like, he did this Bane series like a year or 2 years back that kept getting delayed, that I was buying, and I was reading it in the beginning, and it was just like, again, nothing happened. Like, it was just so ineffective. There were no stakes, which was just leading me to believe that, like, Chuck Dixon is way at the bottom of his downward descent in quality of content.
Wow.
I mean, how did you feel about this story?
I mean, overall for me, it's like I can see that it wasn't really much going on. It was very simple. You know what I mean? It was Nightwing responding to the whole thing with the bridge going out right after the earthquake. Helps out an EMT, baby born, boom, done. Robin, okay, cool. Like, and that was kind of the thing. That was it. I didn't feel anything from it in terms of, oh my god, that was such a great addition. I was just kind of like, and boop, next story. That was pretty much that, and that's really all I can say about it, because I mean, that as far as the artwork goes, it was all right. It was serviceable. I didn't think it was the worst thing I've ever seen. I didn't think it was great overall, but
it just feels like this is the first.
And that's well, I was gonna say, that's why I kind of sometimes feel like it may have been, like you said, it probably was not a last edition, but to me it kind of feels like it might have been, because it's such a quick story that it just almost seems like no real thought was put into it, and it's just like, let's tell a quick external story just to kind of throw into this.
It was just like, to me, it felt like the first couple pages of an issue where it's like, oh, this is this quick little subplot we're gonna front out at the beginning of an issue before we get to the rest of the issue. Like, that's what it felt like. And it was, and to me, it just shows that, like, Dixon wasn't aware of how to set up a smaller story, because it's what, 8 pages or so,
something like that. Yeah
8-ish pages. And I mean, in 8 pages of a comics, something should happen. But regardless, say he was setting up for a whole issue, that's what it felt like. He didn't figure out how to pace it for the amount of what's the word I'm looking for? Jesus. I don't know
micro
why.
story or something. I don't know.
No. I was thinking of it like in terms of of property space for some reason. That was the term I was going. But he didn't tell a succinct 8-page story. Like he didn't structure it
Mhm.
for 8 pages. By page 2, there was no setup. By page 4, there was no this. You know what I mean? Like, and it's not saying that he has to follow a rigid structure, but we didn't get the bones of a real fleshed out story in these 8 pages, and it just felt
Mhm.
like Dixon didn't know how to do it in 8 pages. You know what I mean? Just given
Yeah, absolutely.
the
You know,
short,
well, I mean, it's almost like short story writing, right? You know, it's like that's
even
kind of
harder.
it's the rules are a little different, than a longer form story, right? Is that
Yeah,
what you're
I
technically
mean,
told?
by comparison, yeah. It's just I don't know. And the thing is, it's really difficult. Like, I'm not going to say that it's not a difficult thing because
Mhm.
8 pages of comic book is not a lot of space to tell a story, and so that's why I think that a lot of the really successful anthology stories like this really push for character because there's
Mhm.
almost nothing you can do with plot in 8 pages of comic book space. You physically
Absolutely.
cannot do good, solid, entertaining plot in 8 pages of comics without it feeling rushed or totally ineffective. And so it's difficult, but it's just very clear that Chuck Dixon could not make it work. You know, he didn't know how to economize his storytelling.
Yeah, and it's really sad because you feel like that something could have like a better story could have taken up the space.
Yeah,
But
for
at
sure.
the same time, it is what it is. And for the most part, like I said, it's the type of story that, it doesn't make me angry or anything like that, saying, this is like the worst thing ever, but it doesn't make me go, oh, that was the greatest thing I ever read in 8 pages, it's just kind of there.
Yeah. I
And
mean, on that, I mean, I know like Rod in the chat is saying 8 pages is never enough. Yeah, maybe for plot, but to be honest, like there were at least 2 stories in this book that were the 8 to 10 pages or whatever that were excellent. It was just that the
yep.
writers were very aware of how much space they had to work. The word I was looking for before, how much real estate they have to work with. Um, and they were able to structure a story that was so character heavy and kind of emotional in some ways, but they really access the impact of these characters and who they are in those
Yep.
8 to 10 pages, and so you can make it work as a story. But again, really where it falls short is plot, and the fact that Chuck Dixon tried to do a plot based story in 8 pages and didn't
Yeah.
focus on character. It was just totally ineffective.
Yeah,
Uh,
generally stories like this got to be a little more, as you say, basically internal than
yeah,
external.
yeah. I mean,
It's almost like a more of a character study.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's to me, that's what these anniversary issues are for. Like they're character studies. They're meant to show off the impact of this character, who they are, what kind of impression they've left to the world around them.
Right, it's a celebration.
Right.
Absolutely. All right, cool. Well, let's go ahead and get on to the next one, which is this one's going to be Nightwing and the Titans in team building. All right. Well, that sounds fun. So, would you like to go ahead and give a little brief?
Yeah. Okay, so nothing really happens.
But honestly, I did find this one pretty funny. I
I
actually I actually laughed. It was weird, but I laughed.
This was another one where I was just like so discouraged by this book because at this point when I was first reading it, I was like, "Oh my god, we're 3 stories in, and I don't like any of these." Uh, Basically, it's an old school Titan style issue written by Devin Grayson, layouts by Dan Jurgens, which I thought was really interesting because you don't see Dan Jurgens penciling full pages, but again, he's doing layouts, so he's not doing tight pencils. Like Dan Jurgens, who was on inks, pretty much finishes everything. So essentially, um, Dan Jurgens sets up the page layouts and the camera angles, and all of the aesthetic choices are Norm Rapmund, which is really unique because you don't see a lot of that in comics anymore. And it's probably just by virtue of the type of project this is. But it's the Titans versus the Hive. Um, you get a little bit of their team dynamics, at least in the context of what time period this issue was written for, which I think is the 80s, if I'm not mistaken.
It looks to be about that,
Yeah, and I think it's Damien Dark. He's going through this old footage and just verbally abusing all of his kind of lower class workers, and all of the footage is just examples of how great the teamwork is between the Titans. And then for some reason, just as Nightwing gets his hands on whatever he needs, he literally in a room full of hostiles unveils himself and was like, "Yeah, you should probably consider doing some team building. You ever consider a pizza night?" And so my first thing that like ticked me off on was like, you are literally in a room full of enemy, like not even like a manageable amount for Nightwing to beat off, like packed with enemy hostiles, and you're like, "Hey, I have this thing you want. I just embarrassed you. Here I am." I'm like, okay, we're not really making this up for a safe getaway, but this was just one of those things where thematically I get it. It's about like relationships and teamwork and collaboration. And like Damien Dark is just like it felt kind of like a children's television show to me. It felt a little bit juvenile in the sense
Mhm.
that, Damien Dark was just like being that douchey friend who is just really, really overbearing and they don't know it. And then Dick is like, obvious fix, and like makes a joke about it, aside from the fact that again, like he leaves himself vulnerable in a room full of enemy hostiles. So this was just another one that I'm like, I mean, the art's cool. I think the art is super evocative of the
Mhm.
of this time in comics. I love this old school Nightwing look, and it's cool getting to see like the Titans as a part of this homage. But as a story, I think the concept for the plot is pretty decent. The execution again is just not there. It just felt so hokey to me. I don't know, how are you feeling about it?
Well, I mean, I do agree that, like the last few, it's definitely not uh a great story, but at the same time, it did make me laugh because, we got to see characters like, Damien Dark and stuff, and it's just kind of like, oh god, I'm just surrounded by a bunch of idiots, and then his worker bees proceed to talk and basically prove his point that they all pretty much seem like idiots and stuff like that, which honestly just makes me laugh for the most part. And that, and then when Nightwing reveals, oh haha, I'm here too. It's like, try a pizza night. I think you summarized it best when you said it felt like a cartoon. Almost like if you just kiddied up the artwork and stuff like that, you'd have an episode of Teen Titans Go.
And the funny part about this is Devin Grayson was the one that wrote in Nightwing getting raped. Like, she dealt with some really steamy subjects back in her run. And this is the story she chose to tell in the anniversary.
Maybe DC, when they approached her, about writing the story, they said, "Hey, could you write a story just not the way you normally do it?"
Maybe she's just so self-aware of like the of all the information around her that she was like, "Hey, I'm just not gonna cater to it."
I don't know. I mean, she definitely hammed it up. Like I said,
Yeah,
it gave, if nothing else, it gave me a good laugh. And really, yeah, it's as far as I take it. I mean, you did mention the art. I do like the art.
mhm.
It is really it's really good.
Yeah. It like I said,
But
it really captures the '80s aesthetic. It feels old school Titans.
Yes, it's just the story that's being told, almost like you can sometimes tell when and the artwork doesn't quite match the tone, like the artwork is a different tone to the story itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all I can really say about that. It's not great, but it was funny.
Yeah, I mean it was flat. You know what I mean? Like the first couple of stories are really flat. I think in a very, very soon we'll be coming up on like my favorite story in this whole book. So
Oh
I'm
yeah.
excited.
But basically at this point you were starting to look at that $9.99 price tag and you're like, what did I do?
Yeah, I was like, ooh, there's $3 gone. Like gone. I was like, I like one more and I could buy like a full another issue already.
Right?
So yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, then let's go ahead. Do you got something else to say on this one?
No. I was just gonna segue in. You can go for it, brother.
Oh, yep. All right. So we're moving on to the next one, which we've got yet another Dick Grayson book. That's four stories in a row of Dick Grayson. I'm not giving much attention to any of the Robins, if I do say so myself.
And none of them are great.
and I'm just gonna throw it out there. You can hate me if you want. Dick Grayson is not my favorite Robin. I said it.
I mean, I think that like there's like it's a really odd thing because for me, as a Robin, it's weird. I used to say Tim Drake all the time. It's Damian. My favorite, like Robin.
You went the Damian route.
My favorite. If you're looking at all of the characters to have been Robin, it's Nightwing. Like Nightwing. I love Nightwing. So you know what I mean? So in the role of Robin, it's definitely Damian. But if you're looking at everybody who's ever been Robin, yeah, it's Nightwing, Dick Grayson. Like you know what I mean? So yeah, I think it's just kind of a bummer that these first couple because the thing is, if you look at it too, this 80th anniversary should technically be the anniversary of Dick Grayson because 80 years ago the rest of these characters didn't exist. It was Dick Grayson.
Yeah.
So it's funny because I know a lot of people were actually really upset at the fact that this wasn't just an 80th anniversary of Dick Grayson, but I think it's because the name Robin sells better than Dick Grayson.
It's like we got to try to fit a few others in there if we can.
Yeah.
With Jason Todd getting the short end of the stick again.
Which I get. I mean, Jason Todd got the best story in the whole book. I'll die on that hill.
You're going to die on that hill? All right.
I die on that hill. But yeah, we should probably get into this next one because I'll talk about the Jason Todd story until the end of time.
All right. So the next one is Dick Grayson, this time when he was Agent 37.
Spiral, baby.
Oh, yeah. So if you don't know, for a time, Dick Grayson wasn't Robin, wasn't Nightwing. He was a secret agent because of a little story called Forever Evil, where he was unmasked by Owlman on national TV. So no point in having a secret identity at that point.
Also beaten to near death.
Yeah. Which I really like that story. That was so fun.
Yeah, Forever Evil was great.
Yeah. So it was like You're the Villain, except better.
Good.
And here we are, just bashing comics. But okay, you want to go ahead and give an explanation of this one?
So this story, the premise up until now, I think is the best premise thematically. From what we've seen, I think it's like really middle line for this book, but there's also a lot of things that I don't love. So this takes place during Dick Grayson's time as Agent 37 for Spiral, and he's taking one of the Academy members that are, basically, a student. It's a Hogwarts of young spies. That's really what it is. And he's taking this girl on a mission to recover, a generic isotope B because it could be a weapon of mass destruction. But as we're going, she's like, "What are your qualifications?" He's like, "Well, my teacher was the best." And there are these kind of flashbacks juxtaposed intermittently throughout the story of Batman giving Dick Grayson advice. And every single time Dick Grayson, when he's in a situation where he could apply the advice given to him by Batman, he not only disregards it, but does the exact opposite.
Yep.
So as the story goes on, you learn that the isotope was eventually stolen by some rogue guerrillas from Gorilla City. Tom King implies that Dick Grayson fucks a gorilla, and they get on the front lines of war. The end. Um, but the thing here is that I really really like in concept the idea that, because at the end of the story, spoilers, Batman's final flashback is him saying the last lesson: be you, because you are what makes this role special.
Mhm.
Uh, and that is awesome. That I think is a really great central through line to tell a story that kind of assesses Dick Grayson's perception of Batman as a mentor.
Mhm.
The thing that I really don't like is A, the fact that Tom King implies that he fucked an ape, and B, that the way that he goes about it feels very petulant. He feels like a child. He's like, "Oh, you told me to do this. I'm going to do the exact opposite thing." And like at one of the points, they're sneaking onto this cruise ship to find the isotope, and there are thugs around the corner. And Batman's lesson is use the shadows, Robin, become the night, let the superstitions and the imagination of people do the work for you. Which is funny because this is like better Batman dialogue than he had in his entire run. But he literally then jumps out as he's probably like a measured 14, 15 feet away from them and says, "Hey guys, how's the cruise biz?" And like it gets really hammy, but I'm like at the distance that you're looking at him, like he would have been shot to death. Like you're on a cruise ship, there's maybe about a 5-foot width for you to maneuver around. You're 15 feet away. They have guns. Like you literally just walked out and said hello. Like Dick Grayson, yes, is inherently very different from Batman, and that's what makes him
Mhm.
great. That's what makes him. I think that a lot of people make the argument of being a more interesting character, and I don't necessarily agree, but I can see where that argument comes from,
Mhm.
just on that basis. But here it just feels like petulant defiance, and Tom King really, really hams it up. He does that Tom King thing, and he does the same thing throughout the entire issue, and he does it too much. Um, and that's where this issue really kind of starts to fall flat for me, because the Mikel Yanin art is great. I loved the original Grayson run. I really enjoyed that book. I thought it was one of the most interesting things to do with Dick Grayson, if you're not going to let him be regular old Nightwing. But in general, I thought it was a really cool departure from the norm, and it felt
Mhm.
appropriate. I'm saying that as a fan of the run. But
Right on.
this story again, I mean, Tom King starts to move in the right direction here, where he's trying to do something with character, because the plot's I mean, the plot is so general, it's not even funny. But
Mhm.
we're exploring the character along through the plot, and again, the idea of really highlighting Dick Grayson's differences from Batman and that making him so
Mhm.
special, I think is great. And I think some of the things that he does highlight here is really, really important, like Dick Grayson's trusting nature, like his kind-heartedness, like especially the moment where, Dick Grayson, let me find the exact thing, because um, what lesson was this? Where he basically says that, so Batman says, in your darkest moments when all else fails, remember your anger at the people who took your parents. Use it, let your rage motivate you. And
Mhm.
then Dick Grayson says, in your darkest moments when all else fails, remember all the people you're going to save, which I think is by far the best moment in this entire book, because I think that it was the most successful articulation of why Dick Grayson is special and why he's different from Batman. But again, the consistency of the execution isn't there in this story, and it feels really hammy. And I think that obviously while Dick Grayson is different, there's a lot that he learned from Batman and applies. He's still calculated. As much
Mhm.
as Dick Grayson is a much more free spirited person, he's still calculated. I mean, he's the first Robin. He's the first protege of Batman. So, I think this starts to move in the right direction, but it really flounders around at its core. So I'm curious, how are you feeling about it, Joey?
You know, like I'm not gonna lie. Like when it came to the idea, like you were saying, anytime that Batman was saying, okay, here's a lesson, and you got Dick Grayson, which was basically the opposite of what he was saying. I really like that, because it shows how much of a different character he is, as he stated and stuff. And for the most part, the story moved along really well in the beginning. I kind of liked the whole idea. It felt very spy thriller. Let's try to recover the isotope before the bad guys get it. And then we get to Gorilla City. At that point, it almost felt like a completely different story for me. And I had to wonder, how did we go from A to B? Because it was just such a sudden shift. I mean, not just, it wasn't just a sudden shift in story, but also in terms of like, the tone, in terms of like the color and stuff. Because like, we're on the ship, a very spy thriller. We have some dark grays, some blues. And then, next thing we know, we're in Gorilla City and we got all these oranges and just bright colors, and just really seemed like it was, almost like, two different stories were starting to get meshed together. But I love the sentiment of Dick Grayson being, his own man and fundamentally different from Batman in terms of where he stands in terms of his own set of rules, and then ending on, at the end of the day, ignore your mentor, do what you do best, be you. Mm-hmm. I love that. Mm-hmm. I really love that, because Dick Grayson very much did that. Pretty much the only thing I didn't really like, as you had stated, was the idea that Dick Grayson may have copulated with a gorilla. Yep. Which I would actually like to talk to Tom King and like, how did we get here? Because I'm pretty sure at that point, as soon as she turned into a gorilla, Dick Grayson would have been like, no, I'm good. Yep. And even maybe from the gorilla's perspective, she would have been like, yeah, that's not going to happen. But they left it up in the air. They didn't spell it out. It was just sort of hinted at that it may have happened. But
I think it was heavily implied.
Oh yeah, it was definitely heavily implied, but who knows? Maybe like because she did say that what is it? He has to meet her dad or something like that, right?
Yeah, do the dance of the averted gaze or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Dance of the averted gaze. Maybe for all we know, too, she could have taken him to dad, and dad was just like, no, you can't. Do you know what that would do to society?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, so it was, for me overall, like, I guess I could say I like the sentiment. It was just how it ended up.
Yeah. No. Yeah, it was something.
Yeah.
But I'm really glad, because we're moving on to the best story in this entire book.
Oh. The best, you say?
It is the best story in this entire book. I'll argue it. I'll die on that hill.
I'm going to say right now, I'm going to say...
Oh, you liked the Super Sun story. I know you did.
Oh, no, I love the Super Sun story. But one thing I will say, when I did read this story, the one we're coming up to, I may have actually teared up a little.
I did too. This story was incredible. Look at the first page. Look at how beautiful the colors are. It's astounding. So this story was written by Judd Winnick, and art was done completely by Dustin Nguyen. And first of all, I have been missing these two on a Red Hood Batman family related title for so long, because I absolutely love Under the Hood. I love Judd Winnick's Batman run. I love Dustin Nguyen in Gotham, and his art has only gotten better. Oh my God. So this story begins with Jason Todd sprinting across the rooftops of Gotham, anxiously looking for something or someone. And when he sees the Batmobile, and I believe this is the same alley that he stole the wheels of the Batmobile in when Bruce first found him. It reverts back to the past during Jason Todd's earlier time as Robin, and he hands Bruce Wayne a birthday present. And Bruce opens it and he goes, "This is my father's watch," um, which I thought was so funny. And Jason is just so excited, like just this young innocent Jason, just like yeah. And then Bruce says it was broken, and Jason started fixing it mostly. And Alfred kind of leans over Bruce's shoulder and he's been working on it for months. And it goes into just how much effort Jason put into fixing this watch for Bruce, who was his surrogate father. And it does this really smart. Judd Winnick and Dustin Nguyen are really smart about the way that they're cutting this because it feels a lot like film, and it cuts immediately for one panel to the present where Jason
Mhm.
jumps out right in front of the Batmobile, and it's again this really intense blend of oranges and reds and blacks, and it's smoky. Um, and he goes back to the past, and then back to the present again, and he goes, "Yeah, like you're gonna wear it a lot." And next page, uh, you know, it's the entire next page is back in the past, and he's like, yeah, like the watch needs to be with you all the time. It needs to stay wound. It's powered by motion, and Jason says it needs a lot of attention, but he's still working on it, and he might lose the automatic part or something, so he needs more time to get it right. So he asks if he can officially give it to Bruce when he's done, and Bruce says yes. And Bruce gets out of the car in the present, and it's oh my god, like the art is just incredible, absolutely incredible. And there's a gift wrapped box there, and it's the watch. And this is several years later, and the watch is working. And again, really smart about the way they're cutting these panels and in the sequential narrative here. Batman looks up at Jason on the rooftop, and then it cuts back to Batman in the past, and he says, and it's just Jason. Cuts, and then it's Jason in the past says yeah, and it cuts back to the present, and it's Jason staring down at him from the rooftop. Back to the past, he says, Batman says thank you, and he says sure, happy birthday, Bruce. And then it cuts back to the last panel. It's the present, and it's Jason from the rooftop saying happy birthday, Bruce. Um, and this was like tear jerking. This was
Mhm.
and I know that the main reason I had asked you before you had actually picked up this book, if you had read this book, was if you had read this story. And I don't know, have we had the conversation about like what the major like allegory is in the story?
No.
Jason Todd is the watch.
Mm.
Jason Todd is the watch. He's constantly trying to fix himself for Batman. He's constantly trying to, and in the beginning, when he first gives him the watch, it's representative of him trying to meld this relationship with his father figure, but
Right.
he's so half fixed. And it takes over a decade, and Jason Todd gives him the watch when Jason Todd feels comfortable in his own skin, like he feels like he's not lesser than. And I just love like Jason, even in the dialogue, the way he irons it out. And if you look at the watch as Jason in particular, and how it represents his growth as a character and his relationship with Batman, you know, Alfred, first of all, the fact that it's his father's watch is heavily indicative of the relationship that Jason wants from Batman. Um, and they say it was broken, and he goes, "I fixed it. Mostly, it's no big deal." And it's when Jason starts working on himself as a person. He was found as a gutter rat trying to steal his tires, and now he's going out and doing something with himself. And when Alfred leans over and he says he's been working on this for months, Jason Todd is constantly working on himself to be better for Batman. He's not doing it to be better for other people. He's doing it for Bruce's attention.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the part where he says, um, it needs to be on you at all times. Like Jason needs Batman for in that relationship with his essential father for a chance to be better, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And assumedly the scene in the present, they haven't been with each other in such a long time. And it's him finally coming to Bruce saying, I think I'm fixed. Like, I think I'm ready to be the functional watch for you. And I thought it was just so touching, man. I think it's an incredible story, from art to the writing to what we're saying about the character. It just made me remember why Jason Todd is an important member of the Bat family, and why he's more than just the black sheep. It was so good. This story was so good. You know what I mean? Like, I when I first read this story, I was tearing up like a motherfucker, man. This was
Yeah, dude, I hear you. So, I mean, I didn't quite read into it the same way you did in terms of like, really looking at Jason, as an allegory for the watch and stuff like that. Because I'm not analytical like that, because I'm just a dumb motherfucker who only sees the surface shit. But I did cry at this story because of how touching it is, and just like the emotion of watching young Jason Todd, give his surrogate father this gift, saying, this is for you, but it's not quite ready. I'm going to give it to you when it is, if that's okay. He says yes. And then, like you said, we see those panels play out of, Bruce go into the Batmobile, and then it's just the box sitting on top of it there, right on the hood. And as soon as he opens it up and it's the watch, I was just like,
yeah.
oh my God,
and
the feels are real here, man.
The color play, I think, is a huge
Oh yeah,
part of setting these scenes, because when you're back in the past, it's, all of the background colors are very cold. They're blues, they're purples, they're grays.
exactly. Yep.
And in the present, when it's this culmination of their relationship and their emotion, it's all of these hot colors. It's blends of reds and orange. So like John Cleese, the colorist, man, absolutely goes out to him, because he makes this
nailed it for sure here.
He makes this feel like cinema. And again, just this is comic book collaboration at its best. They knew the real estate they had to play with. They told an intense story about character. It was smart. It was
very much
symbolism. Like, this was the perfect anthology story. And I think the fact that he did this with arguably like everybody's least favorite Robin.
Yes, because I mean, because keep in mind, for those watching, Robin at one point was so hated that when the readers had a choice whether to let him live or die during death in the family, the majority of people said just kill that little bastard.
Yeah, and you know what the funny part is? The vote was like, it was under 100 votes, and supposedly there's a rumor going around that somebody used like early computers to have like it keep calling and voting over 100 times.
Dang.
Rumor going around that whoever did that single-handedly caused the death of Jason Todd. And funny story, I don't know if you know this, our friend and collaborator Comic Boom actually voted to kill Jason Todd.
Oh, he was part of that? No way.
He voted to kill Jason, which is so funny.
Dang, that is crazy, But then he comes back into the Under the Red Hood story and becomes one of the best characters and one of the best members of the Bat family. Like, because I can see what people were saying with the way he was written before, in terms of his earlier stories. But
discount Dick Grayson when he was first, like pre-crisis, he was literally a copy of Dick Grayson.
Yeah.
Post-crisis on Infinite Earths, and then he got his own origin story.
And just became kind of snobby.
I mean, yeah, he's the black sheep of the family, and even his Red Hood.
Yeah, but I mean, if it was one single person that apparently used a computer to really hone in on the death of Jason Todd, if we ever find that person, we need to give him a medal.
Yeah,
because he not only was the death of Jason Todd like necessary, I guess you could say, for moving forward, we wouldn't have had the Red Hood otherwise.
Dude, Red Hood, like I said, Under the Red Hood, awesome. And like what they did during like Batman and Robin with like Red Hood and his protege, whose name I don't remember, when he was like a mass murdering villain, and then like when Dick was Batman and he had Damon, that was so cool, that dynamic.
Yes.
And as a villain, Jason Todd was fucking dope. I remember first reading that story and I was like, wow, this is nuts. Because as soon as I got the inkling that it was Jason, I was like, take off the mask. I was like, take it off. I want to see. Like, and then, you know, as a member of the Bat family, because of his past, it develops a totally different dynamic for him and the family, because his relationship with Bruce is unlike any other.
Yes.
He is a constant. The reason to me that Bruce never bonds with Jason like he does the rest of the family is because Jason is a constant reminder of his biggest failure.
Boom.
And he's afraid to fail him again. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, this story was it was so special because I think it reminded me even, and I hold a very dear spot for Jason Todd, but I remember like after reading this story, my peak of like loving Jason Todd and really feeling the importance of his character and his dynamic with Batman is just so special. And this story hit it out of the park, man. Like this was a 10 out of 10 anthology story, man. And you know me, I'm a critical motherfucker and I don't hand those out. This story was just so special.
Yeah, dude, I gotta agree with that because, you know, I mean, I went into this book expecting Super Sons to honestly be my favorite story. And then when this one hit, like I said, the emotion is just there. And there are very few stories in comics that I can read that can actually make me tear up. That's only happened a handful of times. So I really got to give, you know, hats off to the entire creative team here on this particular issue.
Yeah, it was definitely something special. And you know, I could talk about it all day if you let me. So
well, let's maybe we could come back at another time and just do a full discussion on this one particular story if need be. Yeah. So let's move on to the next one, which is a Tim Drake story, Robin 3 in extra credit. So
I just hear SpongeBob. It's like that Mrs. Puffy's like extra credit.
I've never really watched SpongeBob, so I have no idea what you're talking about.
I don't know. Yeah, SpongeBob was very like a huge thing for my generation of children.
Oh, I bet. Well, the way I see it is I have a 16-month-old daughter. I'm pretty sure we're gonna hit that at some point.
Jesus, man, that's crazy. It's been 16 freaking months.
I know, right? Like she's walking, she's got teeth. It's insanity. Like she's actually saying words now, like thank you and stuff when we hand her some. It's not. I know.
That's so crazy.
But anyway, do you want to explain this one?
Yeah. So, plot wise, again, it's very vague. I think this story is really about Tim Drake rediscovering himself in certain aspects and it being kind of this big leading example of, you know, how much Tim Drake puts into his role of being Robin. Now mentioning the creative team, Adam Beechin writing, Freddie Williams II as the artist, Jeremy Caldwell on colors, and Rob Lee on letters. Now, Adam Beechin, a lot of you might not know, he did the early comic book adaptations of Batman Beyond. And they were awesome. They were really, really like, and he did it for years. Like he did the first, I think, like 3 or 4 Batman Beyond comic book series ever. And they really built upon that mythos. So I am actually a big fan of Adam Beechin. Freddie E. Williams did all of the Batman TMNT crossovers that I'm sure, you know, anybody who reads current comics is at least tangentially aware of. But this story, it was kind of another dry one. Not really a lot happens. I also don't think we're doing anything big with Tim Drake as a character. You know, it's Tim Drake trying to, like, he's basically speaking to his guidance counselor, or like a new guidance counselor, and he's like, oh, this is what I want to do. And then, he's like, oh, well, law enforcement typically wants well-rounded students. First of all, Tim Drake's like, I don't even know like how the categories of blank level intellect go, but he's fucking up there. So whether or not he's well-rounded or not, I'm pretty sure he'd get taken into law enforcement program. So I thought that was a little bit bullshit to like for Adam Beechin to get his point along that way.
Yeah, where he says intelligence isn't enough to get you in, I'm just like,
To be a cop? You serious?
like seriously. I mean, I will say this. I was, I used to be active army. I was in the infantry and stuff like that. And most infantry people, when we get out, there's a very limited list of things that we can do. It generally tends to be firefighter or police officer. Why? Because a lot of us are just dumb motherfuckers.
You got to give yourself more credit, my guy. But yeah, I mean, the story really. So as he's having this conversation with his guidance counselor, it's juxtaposed with scenes of him going out and being Robin. And this story is essentially indicative of, Robin giving up a lot of his personal life to be Robin. And I think the thing that really would have pushed this story is really pushing the fact that he's not doing this out of a necessity, out of instinct.
Mm-hmm.
He's doing this because he wants to, and he's willingly giving his life up. Whereas the other Robins are doing it because there's an obligation,
Right.
because of their scarred past, because of their history with Bruce. But Tim is the one that really seeked out being Robin. I thought the art was pretty good. I think the thing that really kills some of this art is that because a grand majority of this is dialogue and it's character acting, I thought the character acting was pretty dry. Like if you look at Tim Drake's face, it's the same facial expression at different camera angles, almost throughout the entire book when he doesn't have his mask on. So I thought the character acting was pretty weak. Again, especially in a story that spends most of its time in very close quarters conversation. You see what I'm talking about?
Absolutely.
Yeah, but like visually, aesthetically, like the art's really cool. And when Freddie Williams draws Tim in costume, it looks really great. It's the old school, like his first Robin costume, or not his first Robin, but the one that he finally made his own. And I absolutely love it. And yeah, like I said, it doesn't really do too much. It's definitely not a bad story. It's kind of like, in terms of quality, it's like taking what Chuck Dixon did and actually starting to do stuff with character, but it doesn't quite get there. So I don't think that this is necessarily a bad story. I think and it doesn't do anything necessarily in terms of the writing that is wrong. It doesn't.
Right.
Nothing feels inappropriate to the character, and you start to break into why he's important and something a little bit more specific to the character. But I just don't think it quite gets there to make this a good story. It's really forgettable. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and I kind of felt the same way about when I read this one. Yeah, I mean, like you said, the art's all right. But just in terms of what was, what they were trying to convey with this is that, he's pretty much great at everything. It's just academically, he just kind of sticks to his studies and calls it a day, and yeah, I mean, like back when it came to him wanting to be a cop and stuff like that, I thought that was very weird. I thought maybe they could have picked a different area of study in terms of, if they wanted to make it seem like you need a little more than good academics to get into this kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Right. And there's supposed to be like an inherent irony to it that he doesn't do extracurriculars because he spends all of this time.
Yeah, because it's all he does is extracurriculars, basically. So yeah. Really, I mean, he could excel at everything.
Yeah, it's service. It's
if he wanted to.
Yeah, it's that he's making the sacrifice
of
his personal life for the sake of being Robin.
Yeah, exactly, and the sentiment is nice. And just in terms of more or less giving up parts of his life in order to continue doing the crime fighting and stuff like that, which is one of the things I've always liked about Tim Drake as a character and stuff. And really, I will say overall, he has been my favorite Robin for quite a long time. Just because he's the type of Robin that didn't just drop into it, and then, like you said, stay out of obligation. It's something he continued to do, and he really owned the character. Even later, when we see in the next story too, even changes it to when he becomes Red Robin. It's something, he's so cemented himself in the role that he continues to make the role his own, to be separate from other Robins. So now there can always be Batman's Robin, but he is also his own Robin.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean it's cool, and I think that's a good way to segue into the next story, which is entirely about Tim Drake, and it's just in between the New 52 going into Rebirth and the Detective Comics Rebirth run, where Batman and Tim Drake are kind of the catalysts behind a new crime fighting team in Gotham that stars obviously Batman, Tim Drake, Red Robin, Kate Kane, Batwoman, Spoiler, Cassandra Cain, Orphan, and Clayface. Even though they freaking had Duke on the cover and he was no part of it, but hey. But this story was cool. So it was written by James Tynion, who wrote that particular Detective Comics run, who is an adamant fan of Tim Drake. It's drawn by Javier Fernandez, who actually was the Nightwing artist for the majority of the Rebirth Nightwing run under Tim Seeley. Colorist David Barron, and the letters by Carlos Mangual. So yeah, this is basically Tim Drake's rebirth. This is the moment where he decides to um, remove the New 52 Red Robin costume, which I think was cool.
Yeah, I do kind of miss
Say
that.
what you want about what they did with his character. I thought the costume was cool. But it's him donning a little bit more of a classic aesthetic.
Hashtag the New 52 wasn't that bad.
But it reflects his old school aesthetic, but it's more modernized, it's more updated. But he is still Red Robin. And like you said before, it's him becoming his own Robin that is a little bit more independent of Batman. And at this point, he's kind of at a juncture because he has the opportunity to go to college in a school that he's always wanted to go to, or to take part in that new in the Gotham Knights protocol with Batman. And it's really cool because the beginning opens up with him kind of flying or like jumping around the city and swinging, which is really great because they're highlighting this sort of return to form for Tim Drake, because in the old costume, he was flying, and it was a little bit more solitary in that way because he couldn't touch he couldn't touch the grit and the grimstone of Gotham. Like, it doesn't feel earthbound. And here there's the sensation of danger, and there's the sensation of being putting your nose to the street, which I think it's funny because it I don't know if this is intentional or not, but the first person he interacts with is Nightwing, and those qualities feel very Nightwing. They feel like something he picked up from his relationship with Dick Grayson. But throughout, it's him seeking advice from the other Robins, past and present, before making his decision. And plot wise, it's all pretty insignificant because each time he's assisting them in stopping some sort of random crime. And in the first one, it's him and Dick, and the cool thing about the story is, although it's Tim centric, it really highlights like why each one of these other Robins were important. Dick Grayson was the first. He'll always be the first. He was the founder of the Teen Titans, the first sidekick to go make a name for himself. He is the pedestal upon all sidekicks are challenged against. And when he says his piece to Dick, and in a very Dick Grayson fashion, he says, there's going to be a new generation that's going to be starting up younger than they should, and they need people like you to lead them. And then it's your responsibility to do so because you would be the perfect leader. And I thought that was great because, and even Tim Drake acknowledges this in his internal monologue, in the fact that Dick Grayson is offering him this coveted role that Dick Grayson deserves. That is very much for Dick Grayson, but he's also kind of passing that torch to Tim. He's like, "It's your time now, to lead the new generation." And he was
Absolutely.
also implying to a degree that Nightwing thinks that Tim has the potential to be better than he ever was. And then it obviously gets into Jason Todd, Red Hood, and Jason Todd is just kind of, set in his ways. And it goes back to that, like, more aggressive, a little bit more, I don't know how to express myself, Jason Todd. And, he says we were trained by the best in the business, and it's our obligation to take the things that Batman taught us and be better than Batman. Strip away all of the things that don't work and be a better hero than Batman. And then finally, which is what I think really steals the show, is Damian. You get to the current Robin, and I love it because Damian and Tim have a very interesting relationship, because when Damian first appeared, he tried to kill Tim Drake because Tim was the current Robin and Damian was trying to supplant himself as the only Robin.
Right.
And it's so funny because I actually think James Tynion writes a really great Damian Wayne. We've only seen it in bits and pieces, but I think at its core, um, Damian Wayne is kind of like a good dish sponge. He's very gritty on the outside, but when you press through, he's actually like really soft and pleasant. Um, and he's really abrasive. He's like, you should have come to me first. I would have told you. I would have told you what I've been saying for ages. He's like, you're not nearly as smart as you think you are. He's like, you're not so special. You're just the other Robin. You're not the golden child. You're not the heir apparent. You're not the black sheep. You're just the other one. But it's also great because when Damian Wayne gets on his big dialogue push, he says, you want a clear path, some obvious next step. That's your entire problem. You can go to your university if you want to. You can lead Batman's new organization. You're waiting for an invitation to go down a clear path, but you've reached the end of it. Any path you go down now, you're going to have to carve it out for yourself. He says, Drake, you were trained by Batman. You've led the Teen Titans. You fought and won incredible battles and done the impossible. What do you want to do with your life? He says, you can do you can do anything you damn well please. And I love
That's such good.
that.
Yeah, that's a good kicker right there.
And it feels so natural to their relationship because of course Damian isn't going to be outwardly affectionate or outwardly helpful. But at its core, Damian gave him by far the best insight out of everybody. And it also plays back on the fact that again, Tim Drake chose to be Robin. He carved his own path and he didn't even know it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, dude, absolutely.
And that's a central part of his character. And this is where Tim realizes like that's something I have to do now. And this is when he decides to join Batman, and he goes to him in the cave and he says, you know what, these are the people, this is the right way to do it. And he starts kind of becoming a very integral figure in that planning process with Batman. He's no longer the sidekick of Batman.
Yeah, he's not the other one,
right?
As Damian
specified. Yeah, and he feels more like a partner. And I thought this was a really great way not only to outline kind of the individual relationships of all of these Robins, in relation further to Tim Drake, but I thought it was a really cool perspective as to the trajectory of Tim Drake over his time in comics.
Yeah, dude, absolutely. And I will say, I like this story. I thought it was a really well done. The pacing worked for me. And just like I just love all the interactions between Tim and all of the other Robins, where Nightwing is all like, hey, here's my advice. Jason's like, this is mine, and then Damian's like, forget all that, just do you, bro.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I really liked about it, is that at the very end of the day, it doesn't matter what advice is really given. It's all his choice. And, when he was taken into, and of course, when he decides to become Red Robin and stuff like that, some time ago, it was that was such a very good choice, for him as a character. And, it just, just overall it works. I did find that some of the panels a little ugly at times. I will say that, like, primarily, I don't know what it is. It's that feature right there.
Yeah, that one panel,
I don't know what it was about that panel. That panel just made me go like, ugh, next page.
Yeah, I think it was majorly the fact that he drew pupils.
Yeah. I was wondering what was up with that. It was almost like, that I know it's a little off topic, but like, what was it? The difference between the early 2000s Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle show, where the first two seasons, the TMNT and TMNT Fast Forward, just had the white slits, but then when they did the back to the swords, they gave the turtles pupils. It just looks so weird. And here it's kind of the same thing because in every other panel, it's just the white.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he's got pupils, which is even weirder because then you got Nightwing, who's got the exact same kind of close up, but no pupils.
Yeah.
So I think there was also just a bit of a lack of consistency there. But really, I mean, that's just a minor gripe to an overall good story. And yeah, no, and I just like the idea of, of Tim Drake just, like I said, just getting this advice and then deciding, all right, cool, I've made my choice. That's, that fits me the best.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was just a solid story. I think it was my third favorite in this book. The art was I think the panel layouts were really cool, especially in the action scenes. Javier Fernandez is really good at not only setting up the proper camera angles, but I love how he plays with the orientation of panels, and he's not afraid of letting figures kind of break the panel borders into other panels. Thought it was really great. Art was solid. It felt kinetic. And it's very clear that James Tynion loves and knows Tim Drake. And again, I mean, like, Damian really stole the show there at the end.
Definitely later iterations of Damian really started to work. I know a lot of people didn't like Damian in the beginning, but yeah, it just really shows that with a good writer, you can make even a hated character awesome. It happened with Jason. It happened with Damian.
Yeah, I mean, Damian, I could go off on an entire tangent why I think Damian is incredible. But I've loved him from the beginning because I saw from the beginning because I was like, oh, they're going to make me love him. Because he was a brat. He was a little asshole when he first got introduced.
Yeah.
And I really loved that he was so different and so entitled. And unlike the rest of the Robins, who at some point are at fault because they're so self-conscious, Damian Wayne just overcompensates all over the fucking place. And him kind of breaking that mold, I thought was so cool and so different and so important. And again, because of that, I was like, oh, they're gonna turn him into a fucking softie. Like, they're gonna make me love this kid. And that sharp contrast is what was important about him, was because he went from super abrasive that people hated him, and he's at a point where some people still don't like him because they hold some grudge, but like, but if you coronavirus, but if you really pay attention, like, he is so unique and so different from every other Robin, not just because he's the son of Batman, but just in his character traits. And he's so cool, man. He's so different. And again, like, that sharp contrast in being so absolutely hateable to, in his core moments, being so lovable at times, I think was really important to setting up the character because it was so unlike everybody else. But
I agree 110% on that. I mean, some of the best moments that I always found with Damian, like you said, the entitlement aspect of his character, I always found hilarious. With just him walking into the mansion like Bruce is almost already dead, like he owns it, it's his. It's just sitting there like, Pennyworth, my nutty buddies.
Yeah, I love Damian, and I love his relationship with pretty much everybody in the Batman.
Oh yeah. But then but it's just like that portion, and then like later, the story where his mom comes to collect him, like, all right, time to go back to the League of Shadows, and he tells his mom, nope, I'm gonna stay with Dad because I feel like I can learn so much from him.
And the thing is, and it's almost the same case with like the New 52 Shazam. Like, people hated him because Billy Batson was a twat.
I don't know why. I love the New 52 Shazam.
Here's the thing, and it's a very basic tenet of storytelling, and especially with a child. Why would you ever start off with a perfect character? Why? They could never grow. You start off with a character that's flawed. You give them more space to grow and to become likable and to become interesting through their growth. And especially with those two characters in particular, you have to remember They're children. Like, I hated when all of the old men who read old Shazam were like, oh, Billy Batson was such a sweet kid and he was perfect. I was like, dog, if I grew up in an orphanage and didn't get adopted until my mid-teenage years, I'd be a little bit hyper aggressive too. Like, and again, it gives him so much space to grow. I would never want to read a story about a perfect child. Ever.
Oh yeah, I agree, and that was one of the best things that Jeff Johns could have possibly done for the character, you know, because it, like you said, it just has a lot to do with the growth aspect about him, you know, because like it's understandable why he would become as hyper aggressive as he did, you know, because not only was he, you know, not always going to the best places, but also it's like everybody was giving up on him constantly. But that is what I loved about him being selected to be Shazam. When Shazam the Wizard was just like looking into his mind is like, holy crap, you are like, you're like a really bad kid. And it's like, you are one of the most obnoxious little shits I have ever come across in my life. But oh well, world needs saving. Get it done, because it's what was underneath, and it was really also and because that was, and I don't think a lot of people even realize too, is like, for the people that hate the new Shazam but loved the Shazam movie,
it's the same thing.
That was built on the foundation of Jeff Johns' New 52 story.
More than a foundation, it was almost like,
they just brought it over.
Yeah,
because like when I think about any other movie with like Billy Batson as just the good kid, where like, for example, in the Justice League Unlimited animated series, for example, where Lex Luthor easily manipulates both him and Superman and stuff like that. I mean, because there could be some stories there for that character, but ultimately, other than being manipulated by the bad guy, that's kind of where he stands in terms of.
I mean, he's still a child, so there's still a level of gullibility there to some.
Yeah.
But I mean, and Tevye Smoka, hello, by the way, in the chat. He says he thinks that Jeff Smith's Shazam Captain Marvel is 10 times better, and that's your prerogative. Jeff Smith's Shazam is great, and if you guys don't know, Jeff Smith is the same guy who developed Bone and created Bone, and it's awesome. It's great. But the thing I love about Jeff Johns humanizing Billy Batson is it gives him so much more room for growth. And especially under the context of the New 52, where we are reestablishing the origins of these characters, right? Like, you can't start them out perfect. And you have examples like the New 52 Superman. Well, maybe it kind of doesn't work because you begin to lose the essence of Superman. Well, it's like you look at the essence of Shazam. There's a power that is deep inside of him that is overwhelmingly bright. It's a constant metaphor for Billy Batson's potential to do great good, to be great good, to learn, to become a better person. Like, that's what it ultimately represents. And I don't know, I thought it was super strong. But before this becomes the Shazam anniversary conversation, to that same vein, I think Damian is so special because he has so much room to grow. And along the way, under the right writers, while he was still and he still is a bit of a jackass, but there are so many little redeeming pieces to Damian that make you reflect in a number of different ways, aside from the fact that, again, he's a child. Of course he's going to be a little bit obnoxious, but under the context of his life and his upbringing, and that rapid transition to being with his father and having this new family and trying to find his place in that family. It's very daunting. And I don't know. I just think Damian Wayne is such a complex character that not enough writers really give him the time of day. I mean, I have the Peter Tomasi Batman and Robin run in an omnibus on my bookshelf there. And it's
solid run.
It's one of my favorite things in comics in like the last 10 years. It's so good. And it's specifically because they explore Damian's relationship with Bruce, which is so
absolutely. So speaking of Damian, since you're the guest, I'm gonna let you choose. I have time for one more.
Oh,
do you want?
Sorry.
It's like, it's okay. Do you want to do the Super Sons or the Damian Wayne standalone?
Oh, Super Sons, dude, for sure.
Super Sons it is. All right, so yeah, we got time for one more, and we're going to talk about real quick the Super Sons in My Best Friend. And yeah, it's Super Sons.
Yeah,
would
it's
you like
great
to
to have 'em
would you
back.
like to give your take on this one?
Sure, yeah. So basically, the story is Jonathan Kent writing a paper about Damian Wayne, who is his best friend. And the fact that it's drawn by Jorge Jimenez is so right. It is so
Yeah.
right. I've been waiting for him to draw these characters together for so long. But obviously Peter Tomasi helming the pen. And it really is Jonathan Kent writing about why his relationship with Damien is so special. And Tomasi does a particularly good job because I think he really captures the sentimentality and the appropriate because it's not a dialogue, it's him typing, but we'll call it a dialogue or a monologue. We'll call it a monologue, I guess. Of he captures the voicing and the sentimentality of like a 10, 11-year-old boy talking about his best friend because he's
Mhm.
obviously not going to be able to articulate in a way that like an adult would about like the complexity of a relationship, but to the same degree because it's so stripped down, you can really get down to the core of what Jonathan is trying to get at here, and that's what makes this story so touching. um and it really brings up a point, the fact that they haven't been friends since they were infants. They kind of, in Jonathan's eyes, they skipped right to the good stuff. And it shows a photo of them, fighting from the I, I think it was this is an homage to the early Superman issues, the Superman rebirth issues by Tomasi. And he they say, we got right to the good stuff. They've learned a lot together, and a lot of important life stuff along the way, and that he even feels that because Damien grew up in a dark world, that them hanging out together gives him a chance to feel a little bit more of the fun. And I love the school scene where he says, we're study buddies and I help him out with papers. But it's funny because if you look back on those Super Sons issues, or even the Superman issues, like Damian Wayne is obviously like a super genius, and Jonathan Wayne was getting the mediocre, or Jonathan Kent was getting like the mediocre test results, and so I love that dynamic. And then the next page gets very touching, and it's kind of Jonathan Kent being down and out and Damien saving him and stepping up to watch his back. So, he says, and this really hit me here, was that if he had to describe Damien in one word, it would be dependable. No matter what, when the chips are down, he always has my back and he always takes care of me.
Mhm.
I know I can trust him no matter what kind of trouble we're in. And he says, I'm an only child like his dad and like my dad, but if I ever had a chance to have a brother, I know exactly the kind of brother I'd want because he knows me better than anybody and he's with me practically every day. I would never tell him this, but he's pretty cool. And it's funny because, he's dozed off while writing his essay, and Damien is behind him reading the
Mm.
essay. And then, he's like, "You want to go out?" And he's like, "Yeah, let's go." Um, and I thought this story was so touching. Like I said before, Tomasi perfectly captures like the voice of Jonathan Kent, not only specific to him, but as a young child looking to express this level of sentimentality and the bond. And obviously, the art was great because I think that the selection of shots really showed why Damien is an important figure to John Kent. And I love the fact that this was told entirely from somebody else's perspective, because
Mhm.
these stories were told, in the point of view of a Robin, and this was really meant to assess Robin's impact on John Kent from a totally different perspective. So I thought that was absolutely great. Obviously, art's awesome. Jorge Jimenez
Yeah.
is a rising star in comics, and I think the story really, really well encapsulates why their relationship is so important.
Yeah, dude, I agree. And like, in this story, you know, I will say it's probably my second favorite.
Yeah, me too.
Just because I love Super Sons so much, and this story makes me miss the book so much. And every time I read a good Super Sons story, I just get so mad at Bendis.
It is.
But yeah, no, just one thing I just love about Tomasi's writing with between John and Damien is how, these two characters are so polar opposite, but they've had such an effect on each other where, you can tell John has definitely learned, like over the course of Super Sons, has learned to be more confident. He's, learned to be a little more sure of himself. Damien's even softened up a little bit. Like, I still remember, that time that Damien was actually fighting for John to be on the Teen Titans early.
Mm-hmm.
But of course the Teen Titans were like, well, hey, 13, so gotta be at least a team.
It's funny because like the whole way leading up into that arc, he was like, "Yeah, no, you're too young. You'll never cut it." And it was just like
exactly
that really like hostile nature of like a 13-year-old boy, like kind of bullying like his younger brother, out of just like spite. But there's a lot of love underneath. Yeah, I mean their dynamic is so special, and I think not because they're like the only two actual like, hello, child. Not just because they're the only two kind of blood heirs to their respective patriarchs, but because of the dynamic, or not, I don't want to say dynamic. Well, the dynamic is important because of their particular upbringings. I mean, out of all of the Robins, Damien had the most gritty, the most kind of sad, the most cold upbringing. And the fact that you not only have this very special relationship, but there's the sharp contrast between those two characters. And you stated it perfectly where you had mentioned how they're both taking on qualities of one another. And I've said this on a couple of different streams with Comic Boom, where I think because of that and because of them growing up together, they have the potential to be significantly better than their fathers ever were. Because Damian Wayne, because of his relationship with John, will be, obviously, besides the fact that he is so capable at a young age, you can only see that maturing, but he will have the heart of Superman.
Absolutely, and that's exactly, because like in the book itself, like even the dads are pushing them to work together, because whereas Superman and Batman, they had to learn how to work through their differences as adults when they were very cemented in their ways. Their kids get to do it from an early point in their life. And like you had said, it's just so interesting where Damien had that, that cold upbringing where it's like, it's like where he's looking at his mom, his grandpa, and it's like, I'm pretty sure they don't love me.
Yeah.
Whereas John had all of the love and the warmth in the world.
And there was also a pressure, especially to Damien, because when he comes into the Bat family, it's already established, right? Like, at that point had technically 4 Robins, if you want to count
Stephanie.
Yeah, Stephanie's short stint. But he had to live up to the mantle of, like, Dick Grayson cast a pretty long shadow. And like, we want to talk about how Batman cast a shadow. He's also living under the shadow of Dick Grayson. And he's also living under the shadow of Tim Drake. And even to a degree with Jason Todd, it was like a superiority complex thing. And those dynamics just mesh all together into this one really hostile ball of anger. And so watching that interact with like the child of sunlight, essentially, it's so cool to watch those two characters grow. And I think that their relationship is just one of the most special things in Big Two Comics. And I really hope somebody is smart enough to de-age John Kent. And
I totally agree with that, because like Super Sons, in terms of, just the kind of book it was, like with this story, is just a glimmer, just a sample of what that book was overall. And just like, there were very few books out at the time that I could read and put a smile on my face, especially with DC. They like to be, they like to be dark. They like to be gritty, a lot of times and stuff like that. And just to get a breath of joy in there, because just the stories and the adventures these two went on, like when we got the Adventures of Super Sons maxi series, I was so happy when that came out, because I was just like, oh my God, that had to be one of the best times ever. I was just sad when it ended. Yeah. And like you said, I mean, I'm really hoping as soon as Bendis is off the Superman book, that the first thing the next guy does is de-age John Kent and bring back the Super Sons title.
I mean, even if you,
You know,
I mean,
or
obviously, I would love the title, but just as long as they're together in any capacity, like
yeah,
if you want to
or
put
at least the age of maybe enough to where, you know, to the teenage, maybe 13 or so, and get him on Teen Titans. That would also be nice.
as long as we're restoring that dynamic and that relationship, because again, I think just aside from the fact that it's totally entertaining, it's something really, really special, and I think it's really important to the progression of both of those characters moving
Mhm.
forward. And this story in the Robin 80th anniversary, I think, perfectly encapsulates that. So, you know, it's I'm glad we could end this on such a solid story. Um, you know, I could sing its praises for a long time, but you know, it kept it stupid simple is the way to do it, and it was so indicative of Tomasi's understanding of these characters and their relationships. And yeah, I mean, again, and the art I think tonally matched it super
Oh,
well with that kind of Eastern, like Japanese manga inspired style. And
mhm.
you know, there's something about that particular panel where it's like Damien is roughed up, but he's standing in front of kind of a battered John. And the thing is, if I could describe Damien in one word, it would be dependable. And I was like, man, that's that is so
I know
strong.
it, dude. It hits right in the home.
And it articulates especially Damien's growth, because if you look at their first adventure as the Super Sons, when they went off to that Amazo Island thing, I remember like John Kent would turn around and Damien's gone. Like Damien was not dependable in under any context.
Mm-mm.
And I love that the thing that Jonathan Kent values most about him is something is a learned trait, is something that Damian Wayne has perfected to such a degree that it went from something that he was entirely not to something that somebody who is close to him identifies him as holistically. So yeah, the Super Sons are such a special dynamic in comics.
Oh, I agree. I agree. And yeah, same here. I'm glad we could end that on such a good note. But so just a quick aside, since we didn't get to the other ones, you know, we'll probably maybe we could plan another one to kind of just get at those other ones and maybe dig a little deeper in some of these other stories.
I mean, yeah,
Um,
I think we got to the three best stories in my opinion. You know,
yeah, yeah. And
by far, you know, the other two, the Stephanie Brown one is very forgettable in my opinion, and the other Damian Wayne one I thought was fine, which I think are the only two that we skipped. Right?
yeah, exactly. Because because the last one, the last Damian Wayne one was more or less just this. From what I was reading, it's just a setup for an upcoming story,
Yep.
and then yeah, Stephanie Brown was just there.
Yeah, yeah, it was. Yeah, it's another forgettable.
It just kind of like, you know, because like a lot of times, I will say I sometimes forget she was a Robin.
It's so funny because I'm like, oh, this story was forgettable, just like her stint as Robin. Like, how appropriate. Glad we gave
Yep.
her stage space.
Straight up.
Um,
But hey, thanks for joining me, man. I really appreciate you coming on here. I had a lot of fun today just talking about, you know, Robin and, you know, showing our appreciation for Robin, especially you, because, you know, you're definitely a bigger Robin fan than I am. Overall, I can definitely tell that. But through that, dude, I tell you, you have gotten me a lot more excited about Robin and stuff.
yeah. That's what I'm
Yeah. So, yeah, dude, with that, you know, go ahead if you want to do your outro. I've also left a link in the description to Dark Knight's channel. Make sure you check this dude out because he kicks ass at videos, man. Love your work.
I appreciate it, brother. Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be doing a video on Robin's 80th anniversary where I'll be talking more about my 5 favorite stories and ranking them. So I'll be going a little bit more, probably a little bit more in depth than I did during this discussion, but and just kind of recapping the summaries. And there will be a potential giveaway for a free physical copy of this book for you guys because of my sponsor. So make sure you guys come on over, check that out, and watch till the end of that video to figure out how you can win a copy for yourself, because it's a nice bulky $10 book. And you know, for as many stories that I didn't love in there, there were a couple there towards the back end that I was absolutely enamored with. So 100% worth it. And yeah, I'll be doing a discussion this weekend on COVID-19, how it's affecting the comic book industry, and you know, where myself and a collaborator of both of our channels, Comic Boom, might be thinking the comic book industry is going to be going in terms of its trajectory and how it's going to recover from all this craziness. So
Yeah.
that'll be happening, I think, at 3 p.m. Eastern on Sunday. So that'll be happening soon. Obviously, make sure you guys subscribe to this guy. Directions are a thing. Because I know he's pushing towards 300 subs, and if you guys don't know that, you should. So make sure you guys share this video. Make sure you guys share all of the videos that you enjoy from Joey. You know, give him a little bit more traction because he deserves the love, man. So thank you for having me on, brother. And thank you for those of you who joined in watching us live. I don't always see the live comments, so I appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to watch and to engage with us. And obviously, for those of you who are watching on the video on demand, thanks for checking us out.
Right on. Thanks for joining us, Dark Knight Nation. Thank you, everybody who tuned in to this broadcast. I'm Joe for Joe's Geek Show, and if you like this video, go ahead and give us a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell for more comic book content. All right, take care, have a great day, and as always, stay geeky. Yeah, boom. Nope. Boom. Because you got to